Okay, guys, welcome to Success4MEETS. I'm here again with Dr. Robin Kelly. We had a podcast about a month ago, and he's got some really good comments, views on YouTube. So we thought we'd get back together and talk about his book, The Human Hologram. Now, I'm a big fan of David Icke's work. I know it's sort of out there for a lot of people, but actually, when you look into it, a lot of it makes more sense than the media makes you believe. The mainstream media makes you believe. So it was great to sit here and talk to someone who's sort of a like-minded sort of understanding of that work. So, Robin, welcome to the show, and how have you been?
I've been good, Richard. It's been really good. Yep, we've had a good time here, I'm in New Zealand, as you probably realise, and we see the first light of day, so we know what's going on. Hillary Clinton's been here, so she's been trying to get the light and draw the light into her life.
Has she's been sucking it out of the system?
She somewhat, if anybody listened to her. She had a show here, but nobody was allowed to ask any questions. Funny that.
No way. No questions at all.
No, $500 to go and see her. $500, which is about £250 to sit and listen
to her.
No
what
questions.
What was she talking about?
I don't know. I don't know how you can lose an election. Basically, I think I don't know. And
oh, bless her. She's very...
I didn't go. You know.
No, she's not a very well lady. She's another bizarre situation. So we're going to talk about your book, The Human Hologram. So anyone who hasn't read your book, just give a brief overview of what it's about. And if you can be brief, as much as you can, really.
Yep, I'll do that. My third book, and as I said, I wrote The Human Antenna before. I've got them here. Just happen to have them here. Yeah, wrong way around. Because the first book leading into this book was that we were, as we went through life, there was a growth that we may get older and more decrepit, but ultimately there should be a growth in wisdom and in consciousness. And I was very interested in how we are creative, how we get into a creative state and stuff flows through us. How do we get into the zone? And it seems to be that if we get into a more meditative state and we get our worries and our sort of frontal lobes out of the way, we can be receivers of wisdom. And how I, as a doctor, have realized as we are confronted in our life through illness and traumas and challenges, that actually we often come out of that with a degree of wisdom and we can help others. So I was just seeing there's a spiral growth of consciousness as we age, and that suggested that we were a receiver of wisdom, universal wisdom, of consciousness, and somehow that flowed through us. And I also sort of posited that in fact, the world that we see around us is one version of reality. That somehow that our senses are involved in this, our appreciation of this solid world, and but there's more besides, and therefore when we pass on, there may be that our physical bodies in fact dissolve, but the consciousness survives, because the consciousness is the stuff that flows through us. And that I also suggested in that, and I went on deeper into this in The Human Hologram, that we are part of this consciousness, that if we actually perform and do good in life, that this consciousness grows for other people to absorb. Therefore, I suppose that's the bottom line of why we're here. But it also suggests that over the last 20 years or so, it's become a realistic scientific paradigm that we live in a holographic universe. That in fact, and there are many aspects to that. One of the aspects of that is that we live in a sort of virtual reality, and that we are in fact subsequent to a greater consciousness, which again our senses help create. And so in the human antenna, I was saying we were like an antenna, a receiver and a transmitter of this consciousness. In other words, as our consciousness grow, therefore the consciousness of our society grows and further afield. What I'm saying is, in the human hologram, is that it's not just us and it. We are this consciousness, that we are a holographic part, a microcosm of this consciousness. So it's just not us walking through these dimensions of fields and fuzzy sort of stuff. It's not just us wandering through a dream. Our bodies are part of this as well. And so that's the concept. And what does this mean? And as we've said last time, is this a good thing to know, or is it basically too much information? Is it going to just drive us crazy and take us away from enjoying our life and doing good things? And I'm suggesting that there are good things to come from studying this. So that's where we're at with the human hologram, and I can explain in a few minutes, if you like, how this paradigm was opened up to me from very practical observations in my medical practice. Can I go on to that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, what we wanted to get together and chat today, and you just pointed out there whether this was a good thing to know or a hard thing to know. And I think it all feeds back into self, how consciously aware you are of what matters to you. And the word, the term matter is a great term that gets batted around. I love the term of what's the matter with you. And we said this in the last one. The matter that you carry around, obviously, is antimatter, is the reverse. And I liked, how did you kind of get involved and want an interest in this?
I'm glad you asked me that.
Yeah, there must be because we're all trying to solve a problem for ourselves, aren't we? And in a way, and by saying something that we believe in, we're almost asking a question at exactly the same time.
Yeah, I think so. Look, I started to do acupuncture pretty well the first week of I went into general practice in 1981, and the reason for that was that one of the medical partners here had been to China, and he'd been there for 3 months, I apologize, and he started to do it, and I became very intrigued because people would come back to me and say, hey, not only did my pain improve, but I felt better, I slept better. The women said their periods felt better. And I thought, well, this is incredible. I don't know the downside to this apart from me not knowing how it works. Now, very sadly, he died. He was only in his early 40s. He died suddenly about 3 months later. So I really took over. I was really impressed with what he did. I thought he was an amazing doctor as well. He was a very kind doctor. That seemed to be linked also with the success he was getting, if you like. So I studied this, and I felt the same. I started by treating people with sore necks, and I would maybe use 1 or 2 points in the quarter of an hour that I had, and people would walk out saying, look, I'm really feeling better, I don't need to take your pills. And I said, well, call me in the morning, tell me how you're getting on. So I got to learn about this from a very practical point of view. Now, very early on, I also noticed that there was a way of using acupuncture just on the ear, and this was known in China for a number of years, that you could just use the ear for any part of the body, but it was actually developed in Europe, in France, because 200 or 300 years ago, the French the Europeans went over to China to try to convert the Chinese to Catholicism. The Jesuits went over. I don't think they were very successful. There are Catholics in China, but they learned some acupuncture on the way. And about 80 years ago, somebody was traveling in south of France and found that was a blacksmith that was treating back pain by soldering with his soldering or his blacksmith, I don't know, he was burning the top of the ear here for people with sciatica. And that was picked up, and it was realized that this was a tradition that had been carried on for 300 or 400 years. And the French took this up, and the ear acupuncture developed in France under a guy called Paul Nogier, who was a doctor there. And he took it one step further because he matched up the different parts of the body of the ear with the anatomical parts of the body and the brain. And very simply, you can't see with this on, but I'll put this down here. If you use the top of the ear here, you can use points by sticking a pin in there, which can treat the bottom part of your back and your bottom. And if you go down to here to the lobe, which around here you'd be treating the neck. And so if you look at the ear, it looks like a baby upside down.
Oh, wow.
And ultimately what you do, and early on this is what I did, is that I just use a needle, and I would go over with the blunt end of the needle over the point, found a tender spot in the lower part. If somebody had a sore neck, for instance, and stuck a pin in there, and they go like this. They say ow a little bit, but that was all right. And then they'd say, well, my neck's feeling better. So I thought, that's great. Take the pin out, and the problem would disappear. And the same for other parts. And so I started experimenting with this, and found that you could do a lot just by using the ear. Now, one of the principles of a hologram, of course, is that the smallest part carries the information of the largest part, and particularly if the smallest part looks a bit like the largest part as well. So the smallest part here was, I've got it here, what they call the baby in the ear. If I can show this here. There was an upside down baby. Can you see that?
Yeah, I see that, yep.
Okay. Then, I started to do this, and I thought, well, I wonder why that happened. And sort of during the 80s and 90s, I learned about holograms, and I learned that, as you know, you deflect two laser beams onto a surface like a photographic plate, a special photographic plate. And then if you fire the laser beam through as well, you'll get this holographic image. But if you cut little corners off the photographic plate and do the same, you get the same picture. So in other words, every part of that photographic plate, when there have been converging laser beams, creates a model of the part. So I thought this is a little bit similar to what I'm discovering here. Now, in the cut to the early 90s, we learned, with a number of doctors around the world picked up on this, and we were determined to learn this acupuncture not just from the chemical point of view, which people said, well, there are chemical changes, you get endorphins and pain numbing chemicals are developed. I said, well, let's just follow what the Chinese said. And so we went into the Chinese philosophy that our bodies are a reflection of a greater whole. Very much like I've said, our bodies are a reflection of a greater consciousness. As above, so below.
That's exactly what I was just thinking. Yeah, that term just popped in my head.
As above, so below. So therefore, which is very much the same, that we are, and we're not just, we are maybe a small part, but we're a small, complete part of a greater consciousness. So we really get more into holographic theory. Now, this stuff really came into its own in the Gulf War and since, because in the Middle East, there were doctors, actually there were American doctors who were studying with us, who were on the same track, and in fact started to use ear acupuncture in the air ambulances. So when people got injured in them, or got shot in the back or in the neck or any part of the body, before they gave them morphine, they would just train up their paramedics to find these tender spots and put little studs in their ear, okay, into these parts. And they found they could use less morphine that way. So they were using it. It's called battlefront acupuncture. They're using the ear as to help reduce down pain. Interesting enough, the same people are using the ear to treat post-traumatic stress, which is a really, and they're combining it with an understanding of Chinese medicine. And we can go into that whole area as well, because this is why this is so important in trauma. So there we were. Most of us were saying, hey, this is very practical, because there aren't too many downsides as long as you use good equipment and that you've got good aseptic technique, and we can do all that. There isn't a downside. But the only downside is that we don't know how it's working. But therefore, it is up to us to try and logically work this out. And that was the impetus behind me writing books, because as you know, as a medical doctor, it's important. I'm not too bothered about my colleagues, but if they were just saying, hey, that's rubbish, I don't believe it, and they would say it even when they saw their patients getting better, I said, well, I can believe that there's some good science behind this. Maybe we're just discovering the science. And this is heckish important because it means that I can use these things and use less drugs. And then I can use this stuff to teach people that there's more to them than this just sort of bag of chemicals that we've been told we are. And the commonest response when you do this, if somebody comes in with a bad back and you stick a pin in their ear, well, there's a bit of a credibility stuff going on. But they usually say, well, should I be feeling better, Robin? Already? So they're asking me whether they should be feeling better. So, along the way, the power's been taken away from the person to observe how they were getting better as well. Now, I mean, that's one small step, but it sort of drove me to thinking, well, and at the same time, there was this scientific understanding and possibility that we live in a holographic universe. In other words, and part of that is that this reality is like a virtual reality, and that behind it all are fields of consciousness which are infinitely greater and more not interesting, but I suppose they're realms beyond our imagining, if you like. And alongside this is when one begins to study Chinese medicine, when one begins to get into these realms. Personally, in parallel to this, your own understanding seems to grow. You do meditate and you do qigong, and you mix with people that are helping you expand your understanding of this whole realm. And also you notice that your creativity improves. Just as people will realize if they meditate or they do yoga or they practice anything that is going to, let's say, if they get into the zone, whatever it is, if they get into a place where they are not conscious of time passing, they are in a state where they are feeling free and a deep sense of joy. And this is the ideal state of health. You notice that you're at one with the surroundings, and you notice synchronicities. Now, you can't be in that blissful state all the time because, like, today was tax day and I had to do my tax and you have to sit down. My computer wasn't working, and you've got life's challenges that are here, which ground us, which are really important. So this maybe give us an understanding that there's far more to us that we're being told. But we also are saying, well, how come then we're stuck in it seemed to be stuck in this conflicting paradigm, this material stuff which stretches us so much. I tried to address that as well. I say, well, okay, this is great. This is where possibly the holographic science is going, where quantum physics is going, where it seems to tie up with Ayurvedic and Chinese philosophy, and many people are getting this. But what does it mean? Why are we here? Why are we in these realms? Because how can this then be a guide to our lives? So that's what I attempt to answer, and it's a sort of, I suspect the reason I wrote this was what good can come out of this greater understanding of the human condition and our universe.
Yeah, no, I like there was I think it was Joni Mitchell wrote, "You don't know what you got till it's gone," and I always thought that was kind of like the reason why we're here, is to experience what it's like to not have everything that we maybe have from a different realm, so therefore we understand that we have it in the first place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it would seem that if we have reincarnated, it is important we've forgotten a lot of this, so that we learn it in a naive way yet again, and that seems to challenge us. I mean, the other part of this is that I talk about feeling, the science of feeling, that, you know, if we look back in our lives, the most important things we do start with a feeling. You know, we want to go on, look, even simple things like we want to go on holiday, or we feel we want to go to a concert, or we meet somebody and we have feelings for them. So we feel first, and then we put our logical brains into action, working out exactly how we're going to convert these feelings into something that we can do. So our feelings come first and the doings come second. And from an energetic point of view, of course, our heart is many times more electrical and energetic than our brains, and hence, you know, the heart connection, or having your heart in something. I'm sure you're doing with Success4 because your hearts are in it, that you got together because you had this great feeling that was going to work, and then you put your brains in. Then the brain comes in, and then you get harmony between your head and your brain. And some would say lower down in the lower chakras you have this will and this common sense and this earthing that allows this to happen. So that's very much part of it. And the one of the, I suppose, the bottom line for why we're here in this physical form, I would say, is once we pick up on those feelings and we connect with others with this feeling, this heart feeling, we actually do good works. We actually do stuff. It's not just a matter of platitudes and of saying, hey, you know, it's great and it's great to give people a hug, but, you know, you're better to go and do something for somebody. So there you get the feeling, you get the emotion that actually converts to action. And it's good actions that feed back into this energetic system and grows the consciousness. So therefore, you know, you feel, then you put it into action, and the good stuff gets back into the system and grows the consciousness. So we're here to do good stuff.
Yeah, is the 100 monkey syndrome, where obviously you've heard of that, where if 100 monkeys do something, it goes back into their system, and without them needing to be anywhere near the other tribes, they'll learn to do it too. What's your take on that?
Yes, and that was very much in line with Rupert Sheldrake's morphic resonance, where absolutely that there's a tipping point of consciousness, and, you know, many great discoveries were made synchronistically. They weren't just that somebody nicked the idea from someone else in another continent. People came to the same idea at the same sort of time. Absolutely. And so this is the other thing, the synchronicity. This seems to occur outside time and space, that in fact, although we're in this time and space, there is a great, you could say love exists outside time and space. I always say that, say you're stuck in New Zealand and a loved one goes to Alaska, you don't love them any less. So, you know, this is that's non-temporal and non-local. So love is non-local as well, and so is these phenomena. And the same as when somebody dies, you don't love them any less. That love does carry on. You know, as Celine Dion said, you know, the heart goes on. So you know, combined, very much sort of entwined in this theory is that love is the binding force, the binding element that binds us together. Not just of romantic love, which obviously attracts two people into a deeper love, but it's a love for humanity. And the important thing, as I've mentioned before, is that when people do seem to escape this reality, particularly in near-death experiences, of outer-body experiences, lucid dreaming or whatever, when they come back, it seems to be that they take in this love, the love that they've received on this trip, and they start loving the planet and making sure that it's being well looked after, because they look around and say, hey, this is a paradise this is amazing, this stuff, if you look at it in this way. And therefore the love that they've picked up, if you like, in these other realms, they put into action in this world. And that love in action is relayed back into the greater consciousness. I mean, these are all theories, of course, and I'm not trying to pretend I know all this stuff, but that's what seems to make sense to me.
Yeah.
And a life well lived is one being nice to people. If you're having a bad day and you help somebody at the end of the bad day, you do feel better from this. And so, of course, the other person benefits as well.
Which goes back to putting it back in the system. If you give out, you receive what you give away. Yeah, that makes sense as well.
And when people, I look after people who are very sick and dying or whatever, and the love they like from their friends, or somebody's phoning up and say, look, is there anything I can do for you? Can I go do some shopping? Can I make you a cup of tea? But I don't want to impose on you. So the love, that's love in action. It doesn't have to be gushing or sympathy so much. That doesn't impress them, but some love in action is. So they're basically, we're here in this physical realm for a reason, and that we're also here to meet people. I mean, this is great on Skype, but nothing quite matches actually meeting people in the flesh.
No, it doesn't actually. Off on a tangent a bit, we're going to do an experiment. One of the adverts I want to do is having a conversation with someone when they've got a little screen around their face, and see how much difference it makes, even if you're sitting in front of them, and just see the difference in the feelings.
Like a frame.
Yeah. And you're sitting, it straps your body, and it will actually film people having conversations, and it feels different. And I'm sure it would. There's something in between, as you say. It's great to have a chat on Skype, but it will never beat being in the same room. A couple of things I would like to get back to there. You talked about. You said about the synchronicity, and you talked about when you first started to do the acupuncture, and your doctor, the person you learned from, passed away a few weeks before. Do you feel like there was a synchronicity in that information being passed over to you at that time?
I think when you look back, you just look back at your life and you say, there's these things aren't just coincidences, and the important things in your life you couldn't script. There's a great resurgence in we talk about quantum physics, quantum theory, but there's actually a move into an understanding of magic, and magic is actually what happens unexpectedly that you couldn't script. When we say that fact is stranger and more exciting than fiction. And so when you look at your life and for instance, my parents met in India in the war, and if it hadn't been for Hitler and the Shinto religions of Japan, they would never have met. And he was in a trench, and the next guy to him was blown up. And so when you look at that, you say the chances of us being us may be very small, although you just wonder whether we would come in another form. So, we have been guilty of taking magic out of our lives through this focus on materialistic science, which I'm the first to say I've had to learn, and I've had to learn the materialism of the body, and I use it every day. But the downside is we've taken out magic and wonder, and that also takes away hope from people. People are, when they're sick, looking for a miracle, or they're looking to be the one person who defies the statistics, if you like. And it's important for us never to negate that by coming up with statistics and a lot of materialistic scientific theory that's going to dash their hopes, because we don't know. And occasionally we're surprised. Those are the headlines. Doctors were shocked. I lived, that this person lived. Well, doctors, to be honest, are never shocked. They sort of go, so that's how they go. I've never known a doctor shocked. by much, because they're so matter of fact. Oh, I don't know why that happened, but the doctors don't get shocked. But ultimately, and the other thing doctors give you is just, they only give you 3 and 6 months. You know that. They're never 4 and 7 months. You know that.
Yeah.
They always say you only gave them 3 months to live.
Yeah.
You know. So if this ever happens, and that should never happen to you, of course. But everybody says, well, you know, you're going to live 6 months. Well, what about 7? Ask them about it.
What about the
There's always 3 or 6 months. No. So. And of course, if you agree, some people just die there just not to upset their doctor at 3 months. There we go. I mean, so ultimately, I suppose what I'm getting back to is that we're getting away from the magic of living. And when you're dealing with synchronicities, it's like magic. And one of the things I suggest to people, if you're delving into these realms, using acupuncture, helping them, and they want to know, are they getting better? Because some days their pain will be better and some days will be worse. And I always say, look out for synchronicities. Look out, just be aware of connections, funny things that happen that ring a bell with you that may not mean anything to anybody else. Because that, or just sort of, you wake up one day and just feel like you haven't felt in years, even if it lasts for 5 minutes. Take a note of that, because somehow you're connecting with something really special, and it may well be a sign that tide is turning for you. That seems to be the most important thing.
Getting back to this, as a sort of connection with the podcast that we spoke about before, we were talking about narcissism. There's a point where, and you mentioned it just a minute ago, about people keeping hope, keeping their belief in magic alive, and people, and you said that people are looking for a cure, they're looking for hope, but there is this other element that come in and take advantage of that. How can someone tell from tapping in? Is there a feeling that you will know when someone's trying to sort of take advantage of that, or this is actually right for you? I think it's important to sort of try and find that your truth in there.
Yeah, do you mean on when how to detect when somebody doesn't have your best interests?
That's it. Yeah, it's a better way of putting it. Yeah.
I don't know if that's it.
That is exactly what I was trying to say. Yeah.
Well, I've done quite a, for many reasons the last 3 or 4 years, studied narcissistic abuse and I've experienced it at first hand, and then I've also dealt with many people who have come to me because they know I have an interest in this. And one of the videos I did was how we feel with our whole bodies, and this comes back to what we said before. It's trusting a feeling and trusting your intuition as well as your brain, because that's the other thing that probably artificial intelligence isn't going to match us for. I think it's so. There's a general feeling that we have as a human being that this person in front of us doesn't have our interests at heart. I happen to believe women have this. We probably have it as men, but it's been conditioned out of us to a certain extent, because we have tried to escape. Because if we're in a war situation, the man is confronted with another guy with a gun in front of us, we are not going to be opening our hearts and thinking, I wonder what this guy's family's like. He looks like a nice guy. Because if we hesitate, we're going to be shot. And that's happened for generations. So our conditioning is to be suspicious and rather closed. Women, of course, are different, and the survival of the species has been due to the maternal bond, which is an open bond, somebody growing inside them. And they have this intuition and this knowing. And we've been wrong in trying to rationalize it sometimes, haven't we? And we've been very bad at that, because they are talking about what the whole body is saying, and we are saying, hey, well, that doesn't sound right to us. And you realize that we're wrong because we admit that we're wrong often. So in other words, it's a matter, if you're confronted with this, is by somehow being in a situation where if you're feeling something is wrong, not to be pressured from there, because what a narcissist will do will be pressure you away from that feeling, and will probably be making light of it and gaslighting you at the same time. I've said that I don't think it's just body language. I think the narcissist knows the body language. They're the actors. I think we have to feel totally with our whole bodies. And of course, this takes a lot of. This is something I didn't pick up on, and something that I've learned. So I can't expect other people to get this straight away. Although I think it's inherent in all of us. I think we've just forgotten this, and I suppose that's I think the most important thing. If you think something's wrong, or you feel that something's wrong, try not to be pressured into making a decision. Maybe go and sleep on it. So often the narcissistic person counteracts that by controlling thoughts, and makes it very difficult. But it's one of the reasons that I'm trying to teach about this, because to empower people to, because there are more. There's just the person that isn't narcissistic to this degree outnumber the narcissists 95-5, or possibly even more than that. So this shouldn't be difficult for us all to get together and discuss how we're going to counteract the few. And that's not to say the few are very much in control. And it's a matter of us somehow working together, not necessarily playing their game, but rising above them. How that's going to happen, I don't know. That's going to be the magic, maybe.
That kind of leads back to the hologram and the database that I'm thinking of. It seems to be, and this vampires have this same thing about taking your soul, and I always believed that was something to do with taking the fear. They're trying to squeeze you for fear and get that fear based back into the system. So if you're talking about love going back into the system, if you give out love, it's not and I don't mean on a practical level. If you help someone across the road, something nice is going to happen to you. What I meant from that form was that you will feel better about yourself. Therefore, that's your reward. That's your love coming back to you. So in essence, these guys are doing the through the media, through stories of the news especially, but it's fear-based. It's trying to pump fear back into that system, and that's vampirism, if that's the right word, or any word. I might have just made that one up. But it seems to be that way. They're trying to sort of pump that feeling back into the system to make their power stronger, because they understand that they're only the few, the very far and few. But that's why we're saturated in so much fear. So back to the human hologram there, we're kind of like a feeder system. We can either feed it back out into that system and loop back around with love. And it's kind of like the levels of what we're seeing here up in the left-hand corner with the audio. One, the fear and the love is going up and down and trying to balance it, but it's trying to what you give out. And that can be not a case of like people will listen to me having a comment like that and say that's negative. I actually feel that's a very positive and empowering statement to have. So my point is that, do you feel like there's a big sort of like a network, or almost like a cloud, like they're saying now, put all your data in the cloud that's hovering over us? Because I know you've got the form of the apple, and there's the pattern within the apple, and there's the waves around it.
Yeah. One of the things I noticed was, as you say, if you cut a corner of a holographic plate, and shine a laser beam through it, you get a whole picture. And the picture is in perfect proportion. So you notice that everything in nature seems to be in proportion. So if you measure the pentagram inside an apple, if you cut an apple in half, you see a pentagram of all the pips there. But the actual proportion of that is the proportion would be the golden mean, where they intersect. And then we've got the same proportion in our bodies. And we've got the same proportion running throughout nature. So when you look at that, and then you look at fractal dynamics, and you see the bronchial tree, you'll see it's branched like a tree. And if you hold it upside down, it looks just like a tree. And then you get into the fact that, yes, there are these similarities, and that in fact everything is self-replicated, that behind everything else there's probably a mathematical, there's mathematics, that somehow we're converted from this cloud, if you like. There's mathematics behind our form, beyond the physics there's mathematics. And that we're all intimately connected. We're all intimately connected, and we're interconnected to the universe. And it's not just them and us, but it's just so how we grow in our lives. It's very empowering. Actually, has ripples through the universe, and that's an empowering thing. Because one of the downsides is if you can sit on your planet, you look at all the stars, you can think, oh, aren't I little? There's not much going on. I'm insignificant, inconsequential, or whatever. But then you realize, of course, and this is there's some theories behind this, that you're the one right in the middle. Look around, and hey, you're the only we're in the middle of this universe, because your perception says you're in the middle. So I think one of the messages from the human hologram I put over is that this is an empowering. These are empowering theories. It shouldn't make us feel little. It should empower us. But it also knows that the important connections that we have are our loving connections. I spent a lot of time in the 90s as a director of a hospice, and I learned so much from people dying. And it sounds a cliche, but it's very true that, you want to be surrounded by your loved ones at that time. And I also noticed when that happened, when people were in the dying process, their egos went away, basically, and they were surrounded by people who loved and cared for them. And I found that those who were more materialistic in life really struggled with that dying process, because they were feeling they were losing everything. There wasn't a concept that possibly there was love that was going to carry on, that even though this person was dying, the love that they had imparted on in their family was going to last, and maybe the love for them was going to last as well. But the person purely who lived a materialistic life would see everything disappear and would react, because they were reactionary people, to this with quite a lot of fear and terror. That's possibly when the fear comes back to them at that later time, and some will see the light at that stage, and that's fine. That's good. So yeah, I think that when you look at Chinese philosophy, there's the yin and yang, there's the light and the dark, and the two have to coexist. And without these dark challenges, we can't easily shine and show our love. We have to be challenged sometimes for that action to be put into place. I mean, if we have a selfless act, we're actually stopping often doing something we're sort of selfishly enjoying to help somebody else. So that's the true understanding of sacrifice. It isn't about killing somebody or someone else for no reason. It's actually about us sacrificing, taking away something from us for the greater good. So that could be seen as negative, but actually we sacrifice. Women sacrifice their lives for their children. Men too. Men would do that. Many men would, and women would sacrifice. Would say that they're doing a job which they don't enjoy, but for the greater good, to bring up the family. If you like, I think things are changing there, and I'd like to think that those situations are changing, so that people don't feel they have to be in misery so others can thrive. So there's always the dark, and that is important to us as well. That's what challenges us. As I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the war, So, and awful though that seems, we have to remember that. And as I've said before, I think we said last time about the best comedies have a dark element to them. Even Disney, doesn't it? The Disney movies always have a dark sort of Cruella de Vil, sort of annoying people, so that the dogs can run around and look cute.
Yeah, it's the same again as you say there. Yeah. There's a pattern there, even in storytelling, of the darks and the lights. The pattern is there. It's very much. Star Wars is the classic, obvious one. They didn't even bother trying to hide that up. They just thought, just put ones in white and ones in black. That'll do. and it was quite clear what they were trying to do, and it's the same story each time. It just comes in different guises. Do you think that one of David Icke's, and I went to see David Icke recently, has some of the theories that's similar to yours? He says that there is a kind of like, he calls them the archons, but there is whatever you call them, there is some. So say we were in a holographic field, and literally it's all ones and zeros and binary. There is a hack coming through that is a different kind of making us seem like we don't actually know, hiding who we truly are, or what we're truly capable of, or even if it's to the sheer fact that some of the things you're talking about in this podcast are true, it's kind of like negating that and causing mayhem so we can't concentrate. Do you think there's some sort of virus spreading through maybe the last few thousand years? What's your take on that sort of theory?
Yeah, and there's the trickster theory, which you're sort of describing as that, we are put challenges and impossible tasks to do. I think there's that. And I would totally agree. The Archon theory, the Archon, I suppose, legend, parable is that, the archons are there, the dark archons, the materialistic archons, to challenge us, to challenge the Sophia energy, the goddess, the keepers of this paradise that we call Earth, and that we're challenged by the archons, and in fact that the archons are an intrinsic part of how we thrive. We have to be challenged. Similarly, in the Jesus story, I suppose Judas, if it wasn't for Judas, there wouldn't be the Jesus story. So I think there's that, and I think there's that. There's also a wonderful book I may have mentioned before by Paul Levy called Dispelling Wetico, and Wetico is the let's say the psychopathology virus, he would call this, and this is a term coined by the Native American Indians, First Nation, for this virus, which is the greed in man and everything that we talk about when it comes to psychopaths and extreme narcissists and sociopaths, and that in some people it's really manifested, but also it can spread. And so when we talk about psychopathy or psychopathy in the workplace, we are dealing with probably maybe one or two that are very infected with Wetico, but there are others who have caught the virus and are acting like little psychopaths, the secondary psychopaths. And then there are the victims. So what you're seeing is a whole sort of field, if you like, of this playing out. And somehow, because it's so topical, this seems to be important for people to recognize. So to see this virus of the human soul and to recognize it in others. And also, I'd have to say, when you start doing this, you recognize it in yourself, because you realize if you don't recognize it in yourself, you do not become authentic, you become hypocritical. So little things that you've said in the past, put downs that you've had, you try to eliminate. I think that's what we're going through in the world at the moment, certainly in the first world, understanding that. And as we've said before, and as I said, that it would seem to be that those sort of more blatant narcissists, and we'd have to say Trump and many of our world leaders, are so in your face that it's bringing it to people's consciousness. And I think we've had the discussion before, they may not be as dangerous as the covert ones, the ones that you trust, that then your trust is broken.
Yeah, I would 100% say that. I would say it's easy to put someone like Trump, who enjoys all of that, out the front, because they're not as dangerous, because what they're doing, in my opinion, and is that they're distracting you long enough for the covert nature of these people that are far more malignant than he will ever be, to do what they want to do. All the while you're watching a court jester mess around in front of you, really.
And it seems to be that there's an exposure of that, and we're understanding that. And it's, the more serious ones, of course, are the ones that incite, they have a certain charisma. I remember, I think it was Stephen Fry in his book, talking to Alistair Cook, not the cricketer, but the broadcaster. Alistair Cook, the broadcaster who died some years ago, used to every week broadcast letter from America. America, very erudite English man, but he actually attended a pub in Germany in the 30s, and he was there having a drink in the beer house or whatever, and it was outside. It was a summer's day, and then all of a sudden there was this great flurry outside and screaming people and women, and Hitler arrived. And he always arrived with ambulances because there's so many people would faint. It was more than, Justin Bieber times 100, basically. And we sort of forget that people are drawn in because these, for some reason, are very attractive people. Of course, it's difficult for us to see that about Hitler now, isn't it? Because his face equals evil on so many TV programs. But that's almost doing down how we would get sucked in, and how we would, and that still can happen. So it can still happen from people who engender trust, because they did trust him.
And this is the other thing. The good point is this does go back to what we were just saying. The people behind Hitler were the same people who were funding both sides, and that is the point. The point there is that he was the front man. He was the fall guy. He just wanted to be famous. He was a painter that no one really liked. He just wanted to be. In the end, he actually just wanted to be seen, and he was so full of his own ego that he would do anything to be seen. But there were people behind that were funding both sides, and the point is there that there were the malignant, nasty ones, but they never get pointed out until you realise that the people on TV and the ones that you're watching are not the ones you need to be watching. They're the distraction, they're the red herring, they're the ones that are running through the field and you're chasing while everybody else nicks everything out of your back garden.
Yeah, and I was this idea of a magician. When a magician appears on stage, the magic only occurs because of the audience observing the magic. And beside the magician, there's the helper, isn't there, who's sometimes distracting the person. So that can happen for a lovely magic show, but it can also happen for the black magician. They use, the black magician may be in the center of that, but there's a team around them that's very important. And then there's the audience, and everybody's involved. And it's too easy to blame the one person. If we get wise, we can understand so that we're not part of the crowd. And if we are there, we can make changes. We can try and create. We can go away and probably be an activist if we are feeling with our whole body that something is very wrong.
Yeah, the reason why we started Success4 in the first place, because this exact same issue was happening in the self-development world. I feel like there's a massive virus in the self-development world of narcissism and egotism going through and picking off people left, right and centre who are vulnerable. So this is why we do what we do. And I'm very, very passionate about that, not just in the self-development world, but in everything I do. I see it, and because I've been through a narcissistic relationship and I've always felt it, I feel that I get very, very het up about people being taken advantage of, and I see it every day in every single way. Instagram is it's like a platform for narcissism, and I'm not just talking about putting a picture of what you're doing up. I'm not talking about everybody, of course I'm not. But if you call yourself a self-development guru or someone who's a life coach and you're on the beach with your top off showing your abs, there's something not going on right there. If you're not to the point where you can't worry about how you look, and I'm not I like to have my hair nice, but I don't walk around with my top off. It's ridiculous. It's ludicrous. All the while, they're putting their hand in your back pocket and stealing your money. So they haven't got your welfare. And we saw this in the self-development world. It's got a virus. And that's what we're successful trying to do, is stem that virus and go, hang on a minute, have a look at who you're getting involved with. And I think we're talking about the same thing here, because unless you find your way to put back good into this hologram, if it is a hologram we're living in, or world, or universe, or heart, or whatever you want to call it, you're looking the other way and being entertained by the jester, by the Donald Trump, by the self-development guru, by the multi-level marketing thing you're getting yourself into, and by not stemming it, you're actually supporting it and holding it up. And it's only held up on your views, your attention. These people are only held up on your attention. They have nothing else to offer. They're distracting you. So once you just take away that attention, they disappear. And you have all the power to do that, to change the way the world is by just changing your attention.
And I think the challenge is going to become even greater with, well, we know artificial intelligence is there, but the temptation to put goggles on and create a virtual reality, which is being controlled and directed. My concern for that is that, I've said it's so important we use our whole bodies and to detect and to feel, but also to be creative. That's how we absorb things as well. And I think there has to be let's say a counterculture, but there has to be a balance to these the dangers of the whiz-bang artificial intelligence stuff. We've had an advert here for artificial intelligence, but everybody's in this room and they've all got their virtual reality goggles on. And in the next room, there's a orchestra, but they don't even have to go to the next room. They can just sit there in another room and be in the other room. Okay. And I thought about this and I thought, well, if you go to a concert, okay, you go to the concert, but you're actually walking to the concert. You're going to be meeting people. Maybe you're running late. You'll bump into somebody. You'd maybe twist your ankle. There's far more to going to a musical concert than just being there in this. The other thing is that one of the things we're learning about acupuncture is that we have there's more to our. They have discovered in the last 2 months, so it's been confirmed, that the biggest organ in the body is a thing called the interstitium. And the interstitium is this is a web, a cytoskeleton of connective tissue surrounding fluid, little islands and streams. And incidentally, I think this is what we're tapping into with acupuncture. And it's the reason most people don't understand this, that if people are down and depressed, it's good to exercise, not necessarily but to move. And I'm just thinking that we're going to be taking away movement from people, or worse still, like in 1984, I saw the play in 1984 came here, English play. So is that they had in 1984 for 10 minutes or so, you have to do your exercises watched by Big Brother. And I thought that's really interesting because probably they are captured and you do have to move. But what they're doing is taking away movement. And I've said that movement is so important if we're going to do good stuff. All right.
Yeah.
The whole thing is if you're going to a concert, a proper concert, rather than have it in a virtual reality, is that you may meet somebody on the way who's suffering or having a heart attack, and you miss the concert, and that's your sacrifice, if you like. And all this other stuff is a narcissistic world that they're creating. And most of the games, I know there are nice games, and there are games where you can pick flowers, but most of the games are shooting and killing
horrific,
people. And being in a dream, a lucid dream, where you are in control and violent, without consequences, so those are the dangers. Those are the dangers. And what are we missing? It's like, if you're in this situation and we're totally within this matrix that's being controlled, what are we missing? Is our potential being undermined in a massive way? I think
we're say you were sitting there with some goggles on and you're watching and you're playing a virtual reality game. Everything in that game has been manipulated and put in there. The choices aren't yours. The choices within the game that have been answered for you. So they've pre-answered questions thinking you want those answers. So you have only got so much on that disc to play with. So we could be in a world right now where we're in that system of that we only can choose given the options that we've been given. So we don't know if there's other options out of what we've been given right now. So we can only choose to have a chat on Skype. We can only choose to eat. We can only choose to... But we don't know that our choices have been shrunk down. And that's the problem. And that's why I feel like we all feel as if we're being crushed a bit. Because I really do genuinely feel that there's something been switched off. And we all feel disconnected from the choices that we should be able to have. But we don't have those choices. That's prison. That's prison without knowing it. Now, that's being in a prison without knowing it. We don't know if we're in a prison or not. And that gets back to the question you spoke about earlier. Does it matter if we are in a prison and don't know it? Are we happy in our own ignorance is bliss?
Yeah. And to me, I suppose you've said it before, it's not just about a sort of superficial happiness. This is about a fulfilled life. I don't know. Hopefully the things about the artificial intelligence, the goggles will be fun, I'm sure. And there's a big wow factor, and, I'll probably enjoy some of that.
Yes.
But what are we taking away? If at the end of your life, you just said, just take your goggles off, and you wonder what you've done.
That could be the way it is.
There's no point in climbing Everest. I've climbed it in my virtual reality.
This is the thing. We'll take the point out of it.
I've just gone up, and there'll be movies about virtual reality stuff. I don't know. So that comes back to the great things about being alive. What are we taking away? The recent study I saw this morning about linking youth depression in with an addiction to the internet and again, we know that there's a tremendous correlation, and I think it comes down to what's being taken away, what are taking away, as I say, the magic and the potential of us, and the trying of stuff and the trying of new stuff in ways that are challenging us. There will be challenges. There'll be huge challenges for the generation that's coming through. But God, I don't know. It's going to be a tough one if they can't. If they can't escape this stuff. Or they're not allowed to escape, or whatever. I'm sure there will be a way to escape it, but I don't know with these 5G technology what's going to happen. I know Dave likes about this a bit. Yeah.
Well, I always think that they talk about AI taking over. I think that's absolutely ludicrous. You've still got someone to plug the thing in. I mean, it's like saying your camera's going to take over. If you don't charge the battery, it'll stop working eventually. It's in my mind, it doesn't make any sense, but. Also, like were you saying about the new, they found that new skeleton within your body. That came, and then that song "Islands in the Stream" came into my head straight away, because I do think art, films, and everything like that is a subconscious way of a lot of information coming through. Just before we wrap up, what are your sort of understandings of how truth gets into our psyche?
Wow!
As like the human transmitter, what ways do you think it gets into this place?
I think one of the things that when I'm writing, when you start a sentence and you don't quite know where it's going to go, and yet the sentence forms itself. Yeah. I write songs and music, and the music comes through, and to get into that state, I just got to ask for it. I've got to say, somehow it says about time I did this, something like that. And some people say I need a holiday because I deserve it, and on certain levels. So I think that somehow we invite it with our intent, and we let go of a certain amount of control. That's where the good stuff comes from. Sure, we need control for many other things in life, driving a car and making a meal or whatever. There's a lot that we have to, but when it comes to this other stuff, the truth seems to come to us when we let go. And you see it, I've mentioned the dying process. I see it when people are up against it in their lives, things become clear. Life becomes, they have more clarity. Even somebody who has Alzheimer's may have a moment of clarity later on. It also comes through, and we know it's not their brain that's doing that. There's something going through them. So I think there's a certain letting go, we're letting go of ego, I suppose. We need our ego. Our ego and our existence in this life is important, because we have to fend for ourselves in many ways. We have to go from A to B. We need our ego, but to get this deeper truth, we have to let go of stuff, but also preconceived beliefs. We have to let go of our conditioning or question our conditioning. We have to question authority. And we have to come to, when we're listening to somebody, you come in as a naive inquirer, almost like a child, because that way you become open and you can learn. You're not going to be dictated to. You're not going to be trained into this way of thinking. And I'm not saying that's our total being, but this is the balance we have to bring into our lives. Lay ourselves open to become free. As far as the truth, yeah, I mean, you will know if you're in love or you are touched by something very beautiful. That is the truth, whether it's a flower or a beautiful scene or somebody does something really nice to you and you have a tear in your eye, somebody's touched the truth for you. And it can't be measured in other ways, by the way you're feeling. So again, good deeds seem to do it.
That's fantastic. So Robin, thank you for today and for your time. Where can people find your books, your work? And I know you've got music as well, that you write a lot of music.
Yeah, my website, robinkelly.co.nz, or NZ in America. And I have a YouTube channel, Goodbye Psychopaths. One of the way I got through difficult times was bathroom ballads. I decided every week I'd go into the bathroom with a new song, and I'd just wake up on a Saturday morning thinking, either one of mine or that's a nice song. I'll go to the internet, download the lyrics, practice for about half an hour. I have to get the whole thing over in an hour and a half. So there's my bathroom ballads. But I'm doing it really to help people get through. And this is, how you can do things very cheaply with a lot of fun when you're going through a hard time. All right.
And can people find that as well on your website?
Yeah, they can do that. That's really for a laugh. And the books are on Amazon and all the usual things, and on what is it? Twitter, Kindle and all that.
Yeah. So it's the Human Hologram and the Human Antenna, and you've got.
And the music's on Spotify and stuff. Yeah, Healing Waves, which is in my garage. Okay.
Fantastic.
Because I bought it back. Black and white photo from. That's
a great photo. Yeah.
It is, isn't it? They didn't have colour in those days.
They didn't. Well, Robert, thank you for that. Let's do this again, because I could talk to you all day long about philosophies and understanding, and you've got so much knowledge that I'd like to sort of just
we can talk a bit about cytoskeleton and how next time, just as a teaser, how that's connected to acupuncture, but how it's connected to consciousness and how our bodies are formed.
Fantastic. I'll have a look into that. I'll look up some information. What was that called again? Sorry. It's
not the cytoskeleton, but it's called the word the scientists term is interstitium. Interstitium.
Okay.
You just Google that, you'll find there. But in fact, China, they've known about this for decades, and probably millennia when it comes to, because it is actually the basis of the meridian system.
That's fantastic. And I'll also put you in touch with Richard Grannon, because I think you two would have a really good podcast together as well. So he's off on a holiday, but when he gets back, I'll try and get you two together. Thank you, Robin, for your time. I'll let you get on, because I know it's about 10 o'clock where you are, and let you get yourself some sleep. And I will speak to you soon, and I'll get this up in the next hopefully in the next week or so.
Oh, thank you, Richard. Great as ever.
Thank you. Take care. I'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.